Hello, hello. We've had a difficult week, do you think? A very powerful input of energy, which has resulted in lots of things. More letting goes, more insights, more this, more that. But it's all good stuff, isn't it? So today I'm going to talk about my early days of channeling. Channeling 40 years ago was hardly heard of, and the UK especially was rather a wasteland. So, and this was quite an adventure for me because I didn't quite know what it was when it started. And it's not actually channeling I did, it's not trance, but I met a lady who invited me to this meeting in Bath, in the West Country, and I was to travel across country in a little tiny bubble car to this meeting where a medium sat and brought through her teachers and so forth. She was in trance, and I would go for several weeks, and then one day it was suggested I should give it a go. Well, I didn't know what to expect, so one afternoon at home I decided to try it out. Said a prayer first, and the dog, I had a beagle at the time, looked up, ran off, and I just thought I had to start speaking. So I did, and it's a strange experience because you can hear yourself speaking and you think, well, I know this, so you kind of doubt it anyway. But it seemed to be like a slightly different dimension. And the guide that came through, I forget who it was now, oh, I think I do, he mentioned members of the family and so forth to reassure me. It lasted about 10 minutes, I suppose, and it was all very beautiful. And I thought, now what do I do with this? So I decided to, a friend of mine who was very much into this sort of thing, she was in the spiritual kind of world, and we decided to have a meeting at her house. And so I went along and I closed my eyes, and it was like she's more psychic than I was. She said, they're queuing up. She had to hold my hands out. They wanted the link, so she held my hand. They were queuing up. I'd done it many lifetimes, so they were all like ready, prepared, and they all wanted to have a chat. And they were very powerful beings. So they weren't just, they are all powerful, but these were masters, and the power that came through me was quite amazing, actually. It was really lovely. And so I just sat there and talked, and I thought, again, self-doubt, I know, but in those days, I just had to trust my intuition, really, and to think it was okay, and people would give me feedback, and they would ask me questions, so we'd have little meetings, and I'd go along and sit there and do my stuff. It was quite a beautiful experience, actually, because whilst I was in that state of consciousness, it's very peaceful, very loving, and when I came out of it, there was a difference. I knew that I was in somewhere else, and it seemed like it was my soul group. It was beings that I knew. I wouldn't just allow any old Tom, Dick and Harry to come through. Mediums tend to allow anyone that happens to want to give a message or whatever, but I didn't. I was very picky. I said, only if I know you and it's familiar and safe, because obviously you have to be safe. So we had these meetings once a week, and I hadn't got a computer then, and I hadn't even got an electric typewriter. I would come home and write it all out, pages after pages, because we used to make tapes, not videos, little tape, little tape, and I used to play those and listen to myself again and type it all out. Talk about dedication. I think I still have a lot of it now, but of course it was different in those days. Very much, very, very different. And I had a lot of very strange experiences, obviously. They used to come through, and some of the people would ask very silly questions. I found that quite difficult, because I suppose I thought they couldn't be bothered to answer silly questions. And I can remember on one occasion, I went to a meeting in Bath, and it was like the total lack of respect, I felt, because they treated me like a party piece. They all sat around drinking their whiskey and having their cigarettes, and there was me in this very beautiful holy place. And the words came to me, humility. So I used to come home really quite tired out, and it went on for 2 or 3 years, actually. And at the end of it all, I did have to end it, because I felt that the vortex, it's like a channel that they use, was being used by other beings that weren't so happy and safe, so I had to close it all down. So, yeah, I think that's quite a short. I thought it was going to be a long video, this one. So I may just cover at the same time whilst I'm here. Yeah, so the channeling, I do want to say, lots of people do it now. Nearly everyone's doing it now. I don't. I think after so many years of actually, I don't know what you'd call it really, being the earth energy for the spirits came through. I'm obviously doing it, and I'm doing it now possibly. I can feel the change of dimension, but it's not channeling. It's almost like, it's like my consciousness joins with their consciousness, because they can only really say things that I have a remote feeling of. Sometimes they would come out with things like, well, I didn't know that. But mostly it was like enhancement or an enlargement of my own consciousness. And I was working, I think it was more or less fifth dimension, quite high mental energy, because that's my task probably, or my energy that I've used in the past life. So I could link into that. But I refuse to go into trance, because that, to me, is losing, well, it is kind of losing control. You're handing yourself and your mind over to another, and I wouldn't do that, which is very, the Egyptian teachers, I was going to do that today, but there's too much in one in one session. So I'm just explaining about the channeling really, and sometimes when I'm talking to you, occasionally I think, well, I didn't know that, but it's not as conscious. I think eventually this cosmic consciousness, we all join. The more experienced you get, the more conscious you get, the more you're able to blend into the sea of consciousness. I think that's what, you know, it's like everybody, all the beings, the light beings, are very, very beautiful, conscious. The sixth, seventh dimension, the masters are usually on the sixth, and the Arcturus, I think, are on the ninth. So the higher you go, the purer the consciousness. Depends how far you can reach and be willing to share your mind and your consciousness really. And of course, the more experienced you are with things, the more use you are, because you're using what you know, sharing with what they know. It does sound a bit complex, doesn't it? But it's just a bit tricky to start with, because you have to really trust that, you know, you're saying something quite, well, the people that sit and listen enjoy it. They say they feel a difference. They say they can sense the beings around me, and some of them are really quite beautiful. I mean, they really are. I'm not clairvoyant or clairaudient. I suppose my gift is the word and my intuition, and it was very hard for me to completely trust it, to be honest. And I was always a little bit, I'd say, well, I knew that, or if I had a question of my own, and I still have thousands which never seem to get answered, I'd say to somebody in the group, I said, would you please ask a question for me? And even now, when I see the channeling on the internet, I think, hang on a minute, you know, you have to be very discerning, and it is tricky. You have to be very, very discerning, and not to trust anything 100%, because I know from experience, a lot of people think they're channeling, they're not, or they think they're channeling a very high being, and they're not. And if you start getting weird advice, like, you know, don't drink coffee in the mornings, or silly everyday stuff, don't trust it, because spirits are beyond all that. I mean, some of the what you call astral plane spirits would give advice, and they do their best. It's not a criticism. Everybody has their own level of consciousness, but I think the higher you go, the more pure and the more simple it becomes, because really it is a very, the more I've gone into this, and this is 40 years ago, don't forget, the more I've gone into it, the more it is terribly complicated, and yet the more you go into it, the more simple it is. That's a bit of a paradox, isn't it? My master Maharaji, I love him dearly, and he just sits on the stage and talks for an hour or less, and he is channeling his spirit, if you know what I mean. I think when you get to that level, then you become the spirit, you become God, you become the force, you become, and you can feel that when someone is doing it. You can feel the energy, and you can feel the light, you can feel the love, really. I had a lovely experience this morning. I have had quite a tricky time trying to let go of a member of my family. It more or less breaking my heart, but it has to be done. And I came in here this morning, just sat quietly like I do, and you can feel a sudden cold energy, and usually the colder the energy, the purer it is, zooming in quick as a flash, and stood by me and just beamed a lot of love at me. And when I cry like that, I know it's not sadness per se, it's the love that's been beamed at you, because it is so beautiful, so pure, and they are so loving. And yet, for another day, and for my book that will go on Amazon eventually, working with the high beings is not easy. They don't necessarily give you answers or conversations, but they're there. And I suppose the level they're at, they don't need words. They communicate, I find, in just, well, it's frustrating, in buzzes and clicks and light language mostly. So you can't really interpret it. I think it comes in at soul level. So you get the energy and the light and the buzzing and the clicks, sometimes even a knock on the wall. They wake me up sometimes, which they shouldn't. So that comes in at a higher level, and then the mind has to interpret it. So it does you have to be very, very clear what you will accept, if you want to start doing this. Say a prayer or be very positive, because they will have to come from well, it is a high level, it's a very pure level, and I think they're amazing. I've had some amazing beings come through. I think, gosh, it's a long way, into this very dense earth plane from where they're at. They are very beautiful and pure and clear, and travel into this density, I think, takes a lot of courage. So I'm always be very discerning, check things out, and yeah, I'm sure they all want to have a word. So in the beginning was the word, and it still is there, and I'm still chattering on. So I think it's about time I went. I think my camera's flickering. This is another thing, when you get little things like flickerings, or the television flickers on and off, or lights go, that's usually someone's around. And this is not mediumship. Don't get it mixed up with people that, there are very good mediums around that bring messages and so forth, but I can't do that. I'm just consciousness. Okay, my beloveds, that's all for now. I hope you enjoy it, and let me know if you do. It would be nice to hear from you. So God bless for now, and I'll see you another time. Take care. God bless. Bye bye.